For problem number 24, they're asking us to solve quadratic formulas using the quadratic equation this time. Remember, we've already solved them by completing the square. We solved them much earlier in the review by graphing. We've already solved them by factoring, so now we're going to solve them using the quadratic formula. The quadratic formula you will have to have memorized for the exam. I will not be providing it for you. Remember, it's x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So the first thing you need to do is find your a, b, and c, which means you have to have your quadratic equation in ax squared plus bx plus c form, so set equal to 0. So here my a is 1 because there's nothing in front of the squared term. My b is negative 6, and my c is negative 7. So I'm simply going to plug into my formula, and that gives me x equals positive 6, because it said negative b and b was negative 6, plus or minus the square root of b squared, which is 36, minus 4 times a, which is 1, times c, which is negative 7, all over 2 times a, which is 2. So that gives me 6 plus or minus the square root of 36 plus 28, that was negative 4 times 1 times negative 7, all over 2, which gives me 6 plus or minus the square root of 64, all over 2, which is 6 plus or minus 8 over 2. Remember, this is all x equals, so that gives me x equals 6 plus 8 over 2 and 6 minus 8 over 2. Remember, it's a quadratic equation, second power, 2 solutions. So that gives me x equals 6 plus 8 is 14 over 2 and negative 2 over 2, which is 7 and negative 1. But of course we want our answers in order from least to greatest, so it's negative 1 and 7. And of course, how could you check those? You could take them back and plug them in to your original equation and see if it equals 0. Okay, now we're moving on to B. Get my pencil back instead of my eraser. Okay, so this one is not set up in ax squared plus bx plus c form because it's not set equal to 0. So the first thing I want to do is subtract over the 4. So that means I have 3m squared plus 2m minus 4 equals 0, and 3 is my a, 2 is my b, and negative 4 is my c. So I'm going to start right into the equation. I have x equals negative 2 plus or minus the square root of b squared, which is 4, minus 4 times a, which is 3, times c, which is negative 4, all over 2a, which is 2 times 3. So that gives me negative 2 plus or minus the square root of, that's 4 plus 48, all over 6, which is negative 2 plus or minus the square root of 52 over 6. And now 52, if you don't recognize that that's 4 times 13, 13 and 13 is 26, 26 and 26 is 52, then just prime factor it. But because it is 4 times 13, I can take out the square root of 4, which is 2, leaves under there a 13, all over 6. Now because 2 divides into 2, 2, and 6, I do have to reduce that. So let me come up here and I get x equals negative 1 plus or minus 1, which we don't write, times the square root of 13 over, and 2 went into 6 3 times. And that's my final answer for that. Remember, when it says to solve it and it doesn't say approximate your solution, I can't take the square root of 13 unless I do it on my calculator, which is an approximation, and they didn't give me in the instructions that I was allowed to approximate, so I had to leave it under the radical sign. Okay, we're continuing on with C, and it's completely in the wrong order, so I need to add the 3 over to this side, which is going to give me 4x squared plus x plus 3, and now it's equals 0. I'm going to go ahead and put my 0 on this side because we know that that doesn't matter which side of the equal sign my 0 was on. So now I have a is 4, b is 1, and c is 3. So you notice I erased away my quadratic formula. Let's see if we can do it without that. That's going to give me x equals negative b, which is negative 1, plus or minus, do you remember what goes under here? It's b squared minus 4ac. b squared is 1 minus 4 times a is 4 times c is 3 all over 2a, which is 8. So that gives me negative 1 plus or minus the square root of 4 times 4 is 16 times 3 is 48. 1 minus 48 is negative 47 all over 8. Okay, do you remember what you do with a negative under a radical? You have to take out an I, because this factors to negative 1 times 47. The square root of negative 1 is I, so that becomes negative 1 plus or minus I times the square root of positive 47 over 8. That's my final answer, because 47 can't be factored into any two identical factors, and the I is out. You know your I normally goes behind your number, but when it's a radical it's hard to tell whether it's under or out, so I put it in the front, and there's my final answer for that.